viewers, in this video we will dive into the movie I Am Legend. We will discuss the story, provide a clear plot summary and explore the cast and characters. In addition, we will take a look at the film's box office performance and predictions. Finally, we will share reviews and personal reactions. So, let's get started. When approaching a film like I Am Legend, it's important to slow down and recognize why it continued to hold a place in cinematic conservation years after its release. This is not simply another entry in the long line of post-apocalyptic film. It is a project that sits at an interesting crossroad of genre, direction, and production animation. As a reviewer, this is the kind of the film that invite a thoughtful warm up because its value lies not in surface level thrills but in how it is constructed. Let's begin with genre. At first glance, the film fits comfortably with science fiction, but that label alone feels incomplete. It is also draws heavily from horror and psychological drama, creating a hybrid tone that is not always easy to balance. The science fiction aspect provides the conceptual foundation, questions about humanity, technology, and consequence, while the horror element introduces tension and unease. But what truly makes the film worth discussing is how it leans into a quieter, almost meditative, dramatic space. This blending of genre results in a film that feels restrained rather than chaotic, introspective rather than explosive. For viewers and critics alike, the tonal mixture is something to unpack carefully. Now consider the director Francis Lavernes. His approach here is deliberate and controlled rather than relying purely on spectacle. He chooses to create atmosphere through stillness and pacing. This is a risky creative decision in a genre that often depends on constant motion and action. Instead of overwhelming the audience with noise, the direction emphasizes silence, emptiness, and visual contrast. That choice alone makes the film worth examining because it challenges conventional expectation. It shows willingness to prioritize mood over momentum, which can neither deeply engage viewer or leave them unsettled in a different way. The production style further reinforced this uniqueness. Visually, the film adopts a stripped down aesthetic that feels both grand and minimal at the same time. There is a careful attention to the environmental detail. Space are not just background, they become part of the film's identity. The use of lighting, color grading, and camera framing contribute to a tone that is simultaneously bleak and strangely beautiful. Instead of cluttered visual, the production leaned toward openness and negative space, allowing the imaginary to breathe. That breathing room is significant. It creates an almost contemplative viewing experience, which is rare for film in this category. Another aspect of the production worth noting is its balance between practical realism and digital enhancement. The film does not completely abandon visual effects. It uses them in a way that serves the atmosphere rather than dominate it. This restraint is part of what gives the film its grounded feel. It does not try to dazzle at every moment. Instead, it builds a consistent visual language that supports its tone. All of this is why I Am Legend deserves a thoughtful discussion. It is not just about what the film shows, but how it presents itself through genre blending, directorial choices, and production design. These elements work together to create an experience that is quieter, more reflective, and ultimately more layered than many of its peers. As we move deeper into analysis, keeping these foundations in mind will help us better understand what the film is attempting to achieve or where it succeeds or falls short. A useful way to understand the industrial and creative positioning of I Am Legend is to examine its production budget in a more analytical manner. The film was produced with an estimated cost of approximately $150 million, placing it firmly within the upper tier of studio-backed projects of its time. This level of investment signals not only confidence from the studio but also an expectation of wide commercial appeal and sustained box office performance. From a resource education perspective, a significant portion of the budget appeared to have been directed toward creating a believable large-scale environment. One of the defining production challenges was the deception of a disastered urban setting, which require extensive location control, set dressing, and digital augmentation. Filming in a densely populated city while presenting it as empty involved logistical complexity, closing street, managing traffic disruption, and coordinating large crew. These practical coordinations likely consume a notable share of the budget even before post-production enhancement were applied. Another major area of expenditure can be attributed to visual effects. Although the film maintains a relatively restrained visual style, it still relies on computer-generated imagery to support its world building. This includes environmental modification as well as the creation of non-human elements that interact with the physical setting. The balance between practical filming and digital effects suggests a deliberate allocation strategy. Invest enough in CGI to maintain credibility, but not to the extent that it overwhelms the film's grounded tone. This approach reflects a mid 2000s industry trend where studios increasingly integrated digital tools while still relying on physical realism. Personnel costs also represent a meaningful component of the overall budget, with forensic cleverness at the helm. The production required a team capable of executing a visually controlled and tonally consistent project. In addition, the presence of a high-profile lead actor would have contributed to above-average salary expenditure. Such casting decisions are often justified by their potential to attract a global audience, thereby officials' initial costs through broader market reach. When compared to similar films within the post-apocalyptic and science fiction genres, but I am the budget of aligned with other large production of its era. For example, War of the Worlds and The Day After Tomorrow were produced with comparable of higher budget, largely due to their emphasis on spectacle and large ensemble cast. I Am Legend adopt a more contained narrative structure which might suggest a lower cost at first glance. However, the saving from a limiting cast are offset by suggest a lower cost at first glance. However, the saving from a limited cast are offset by the technical demand of creating an unpopulated metropolitan environment and maintaining visual consistency throughout the film. It is also relevant to consider how the budget reflects risk distribution. A $150 million invest required careful planning to ensure return across multiple revenue streams, including theatrical release, home media, and international market. The film's genre hybridity, combining science fiction, drama, and suspense, can be interpreted as a strategy to broaden its appeal. This is in turn justify the allocation of substantial resources to production quality, as higher production values are often associated with stronger audience engagement. The production budget of the film demonstrates a calculated budget. In summary, the production budget of I Am Legend demonstrates a calculated balance between scale and restraint, while the overall cost position it among the major studio production. The allocation of resources reveal a focus on environmental authenticity, control, visual effect, and strategic personnel investment. When viewed alongside comparable film, it became clear that the budget was not excessive relatively to its ambition, but rather aligned with the technical and logistical demand required to realize its specific cinematic approach. Discussing the genre and the mood of the film requires looking beyond simple classification and discussing how its stylistic elements shape the viewing experience. While it is comparably labeled as science fiction, the destination only captures part of its identity. The films operate with a blended framework and now the designation only captured the part of its identity. The films operate within a blended genre framework incorporating elements of horror and psychological drama, and this film play a central role in defining its overall atmosphere. From a genre standpoint, the science fiction component provides a structural background. It introduces a speculative framework grounded in ideas about science, isolation, or altered environment. However, unlike many science fiction films that emphasize technological spectacle or expensive world building, this film adopts a more restrained approach. The genre is used as a lens rather than a centerpiece, allowing other tonal elements to emerge more prominently. This restraint shifts the viewer's attention toward mood and sensory experience rather than conceptual complexity alone. The horror influence is equally significant, though it is applied with measured control instead of relying on constant shocks or over intensity. The film builds unease through anticipation and spatial awareness. Darkness, silence, and sudden contrast in sound design contribute to a persistent tension that lingers even in quieter moments. This creates a form of psychological horror that feels less about immediate fear and more about sustained discomfort. The genre blending here is subtitle. Horror elements are woven into the fabric of the film rather than dominating it outright. Perhaps the most defining aspect of the film genre identity is its alignment with psychological drama. This is reflected in its pacing and tonal consistency. The films frequently slow down, allowing scene to unfold with minimal dialogue and extended visual focal. This deliberate pacing encourages contemplation, giving the audience time to absorb the environment and emotional weight embedded within it. It is a notable departure from the rapid editing and high energy rhythm often associated with similar genre. The result is a viewing experience that feels introspective and at times almost meditative. The mood of the film is heavily shaped by its atmosphere, which can best be described as quiet, desolate, and controlled. This is a strong emphasis on emptiness, not just in a physical sense but in how space is framed and utilized. While it shows minimal movement and careful composition, create a sense of scale that feel both expansive and isolating. The use of visual space becomes a defining stylistic choice, reinforcing the film's subdued tone. Lighting and color grading further contribute to this mood. The film often employs naturalistic lighting during brighter sequences, creating a sense of realism and calm. In contrast, darker scenes shift toward a more stylized approach, using shadow and contrast to heighten tension. This interplay between light and dark is not just aesthetic, it establishes a rhythm that guide the viewer's emotional response. The transition between these visual states are smooth, maintaining tonal coherence throughout. The direction by Francis Lawrence play a key role in maintaining this balance. His approach favors consistency over excess, ensuring that no single stylistic elements overwhelm the other. Sound design is particularly noteworthy in this regard. Silence is used as an active component, not merely the absence of noise. When sound is introduced, whether subtitle, ambient effect, or sudden auditory shift, it carries greater impact due to the precedented quiet. Overall, the genre and the mood of the film are defined by restraint and cohesion rather than leaning heavily into one category. The film integrates multiple genres to create a unified tonal experience. Its pacing, atmosphere, and stylistic decision work together to produce a mood that is subdued yet persistent, inviting viewers to engage with it on a more reflective level. Before watching the film, audience expectations tend to form around a combination of genre familiarity, star presence, and the general tone suggested by its marketing. These expectations are not uniform. They vary depending on viewers' demography, prior exposure to similar film, and individual performance within science fiction and horror spaces. As a reviewer, it's interesting to observe how differently audience may approach the same film before even pressing play. From a demographic standpoint, one of the most immediate draw is the presence of Will Smith. His broad appeal span multiple audience groups from younger viewers who associate him with action-driven entertainment to older audience who appreciate his more dramatic performance. This creates an expectation that the films will be accessible rather than overly niche. Many viewers might anticipate a balance between emotional depth and mainstream entertainment, largely because of his established screen persona. That expectation alone can shape how the film is approached. Some viewers may expect a character driven experience, while others may anticipate a more conventional blockbuster tone. Genre fans bring a different set of expectation. Those who frequently watch science fiction are likely to anticipate speculative ideas, a distinct visual world, and some engagement with larger philosophical questions. However, fans of horror may approach the films expecting tension, fear element, and a darker atmosphere. The combination of these genres can lead to mixed assumption. Some viewers might expect fast-paced intensity, while others may prepare for a slower, more reflective experience. This gap in expectation is important because the film does not fully conform to either extreme. It occupies a middle ground that may align well with some viewers while surprising others. Anticipated theme also play a role in shaping expectations. Without needing to know any specific detail, audience often assume that a film in this category will explore ideas such as survival, isolation, and the limit of human endurance. These are familiar thematic pillars within post-apocalyptic storytelling, and viewers may enter the film expecting to see them presented in a dramatic or emotionally engaging way. At the same time, there is often an expectation of moral or philosophical undertones, questions about science, humanity, or society that elevate the film beyond simple genre entertainment. Whether those expectations are met or subverted depend on how the film balances its tone and pacing. Another key factor is the influence of marketing and visual presentation. Trailers and promotional material typically emphasize atmosphere, scale, and tension. This can lead audience to expect a visually striking experience with moment of intensity spaced throughout. However, marketing often compress a film's tone into short, impactful sequence, which may give the impression of a more action-oriented or suspense-heavy film than it actually is. As a result, some viewers might approach the film expecting constant momentum, while others may anticipate a more subdued, atmospheric journey. Viewer expectations are also shaped by comparison to similar films within the genre. Audience familiar with large-scale science fiction production may expect extensive world building, multiple characters, and complex narrative. In contrast, those who enjoy more intimate or minimalistic film may anticipate a focused character-driven experience. This film sits somewhere between these approaches, and this positioning can influence how different viewers perceived it even before watching. Expectation tied to budget and production scale can further complicate this. Larger budget often spectacle, while the film's tone suggests restraint. Age group is another subtitle but important consideration. Younger viewers may be drawn in by the promise of suspense and visual intensity, expecting a straightforward genre experience. Older audience or those with more exposure to a variety of a film style might expect a slower pace and a strong emphasis on mood and theme. These differing expectations can affect not only initial impression but also the overall satisfaction with the film. Audience expectation for these films are shaped by a combination of star power, genre blending, and marketing cues. Some viewers anticipate a high energy science fiction thriller, others expect a moody, introspective piece, and many fall somewhere in between. This diversity of expectation is part of what makes the films worth discussing because it highlights how preconception influence the viewing experience long before the film itself has a chance to speak. When considering the target audience for the film, it becomes clear that the film is designed to appeal to a fairly broad yet carefully defined group of viewers. Its construction reflects a balance between mainstream accessibility and more restrained atmospheric storytelling, which naturally shape who will connect with it most effectively. From an age group perspective, the film is primarily aimed at mature teenagers and adults. The tone, pacing, and stylistic choice suggest that it is not intended for very young viewers. It is not excessively complex in terms of narrative structure. Its slower rhythm and emphasis on mood require a certain level of patience and attention. Viewers in their late teens and above are more likely to appreciate the film's quiet stretches and reflective atmosphere. Adults, in particularly, may find themselves more receptive to its subdued pacing and thematic weight, as it aligns with a more contemplative viewing style. In terms of interest, the film is well suited for viewers who appreciate atmosphere driven cinema. This includes individuals who value visual storytelling, environmental detail, and control pacing over constant action. It caters to those who are comfortable engaging with silence, minimalism, and gradual tension building. Audience who enjoy films that create a sense of immersion through setting and tone rather than relying slowly on dialogue or rapid plot aggression are likely to find the experience more rewarding. At the same time, the film does not completely exclude viewers who prefer mainstream entertainment. Its production scale and polished presentation make it accessible to those who typically gravitate toward larger studio release. However, it is important to note that while it carries the importance appearance of conventional blockbuster, its execution lean toward restraint. This means that viewers expecting non-stop action or high energy pacing may find it less aligned with their preferences. The film seemed to be intentionally positioned between these two audience types, those seeking spectacle and those seeking atmosphere. Genre preferences play a significant role in defining the target audience. Fans of science fiction are an obvious film, particularly those who are interested in grounded or speculative concept rather than purely futuristic or technology heavy narrative. The film's approach to science fiction is mere and conceptual, making it appealing to viewers who enjoy thinking about broader ideas without being overwhelmed by technical detail. Horror enthusiasts also form an important part of the target audience, though with some qualification. The film incorporates elements of tension and unease, but it does so in a restrained manner. Viewers who prefer psychological or atmospheric horror, where mood and anticipation take precedences over sudden shock, are more likely to respond positively. On the other hand, those who favor fast paced, high intensity horror with frequently scars may find the film's approach more subdued than expected. Additionally, the films appeal to viewers who enjoy character focused experience even within genre framework. While it exists within science fiction and horror category, its stylistic choice suggests an interest in introspection and emotional tone. This makes it suitable for audience who appreciate film that blend genre elements with a quieter, more reflective sensibility. It is not purely action driven, nor is it entirely abstract. Instead, it occupies a middle ground that rewards viewers who are open to both. Another segment of the target audience include fans of Will Smith. His involvement broadened the film's appeal significantly, drawing into viewers who may not gravitate toward this type of genre. His established presence in both action-oriented and dramatic role create an expectation of a balanced performance style which can attract a wider demographic. The casting choice helped bridge the gap between niche genre audience and mainstream viewers. Cultural and viewer context also influence the target audience. The film is well suited for viewers who prefer immersive solo viewing experience rather than casual or background watching. Its pacing and reliance on atmosphere benefit from focused attention, making it ideal for audience who approach films as a primary activity rather than passive entertainment. The film is made for mature viewers who appreciate a blend of science fiction, subtitle horror, and atmospheric drama. It targets those who value mood, pacing, and visual storytelling while still maintaining enough mainstream appeal to engage a broader audience. The film's ability to sit between genre and audience expectation is what defines its reach, making it more effective for viewers who are open to a quieter, more measured cinematic experience. When discussing the emotional experience promised by the film, it is important to focus less on conventional excitement and more on the film's carefully restrained mood. This is not a film that aims to overwhelm the viewer with constant intensity. Instead, it builds a layered emotional landscape that evolves gradually. The experience it offers is defined by restrained atmosphere and quiet persistence that linger beyond individual moments. At its core, the mood is one of control isolation. The film establishes a tone that feels both expansive and inward looking at the same time. There is a noticeable absence of noise and clutter, which create a sense of stillness that can feel almost meditative. This stillness is not meant to be confronting. It carries an underlying tension that gently unsettles the viewer. The emotional effect is subtle but consistent, encouraging a state of awareness rather than immediate reaction. Viewers are invited to sit with the atmosphere to absorb its quiet weight rather than escape it. The mood is reinforced by the film pacing. Instead of rapid shift or abrupt emotional peak, it unfolds in a measured rhythm. Moments of calm are given time to breathe, allowing the audience to fully register the tone before any shift occurs. This deliberate pacing contributes to a sense of anticipation that is more psychological than physical. The viewer is not simply reacting to what is happening on screen but is also engaging with what might happen, creating a continuous undercurrent of unease. It is a form of tension that builds internally rather than externally. The theme that shape this emotional experience revolve around endurance, solitude, and the search for meaning in constrained circumstances. These themes are not presenting in an overt or dictated manner. Instead, they are embedded within the film's tone and visual language. The emphasis is on persistence rather than resolution and maintaining a sense of purpose even when external validation is limited. This thematic focus contributes to a feeling of introspection, encouraging viewers to reflect rather than simply observe. Another key aspect of the emotional experience is the interplay between vulnerability and control. The film maintains a delicate balance between these two states, creating a dynamic that feels both stable and fragile. On one hand, there is a sense of order and routine that ground the experience. On the other hand, there is an ever present awareness that this stability is not absolute. This contrast produces a quite emotional tension where the viewer is simultaneously reassured and unsettled. It is this duality that gives the films much of its emotional depth. The intended effect is not immediate catharsis but gradual immersion. Rather than delivering a single defining emotional moment, the film accumulates its effect over time. The viewer is likely to feel a lingering sense of reflection rather than a clear cut emotional release. This makes the experience more personal as different viewers may connect with different aspects of the film's mood and theme. Some may focus on its sense of isolation while others may respond more strongly so its emphasis on resilience. Sound design and visual composition play a significant role in shaping this emotional journey. Silence is used not as an absence but as a presence in itself, creating space for the viewer's thought and reaction. When sound is introduced, it carries greater emotional weight because of this contrast. Similarly, the visual style marked by open space and controlled framing reinforce the film's introspective tone. These stylistic choices ensure that the emotional experience remains cohesive, with each element contributing to the same overall effect. It is also worth noting that the film does not rely heavily on over sentimentality. Its emotional resonance comes from suggestion rather than explicit expression. This restraint allows the viewers to engage more actively, filming in emotional gaps with their own integration. For some, this approach may feel distant, for others, it can deeply engaging. The film trusts its audience to meet it halfway, which is a defining characteristic of its emotional design. The emotional experience of the film is one of quiet intensity and sustained reflection. It offers a mood that is subdued yet persistent, shaped by themes of endurance and isolation, and delivering through deliberate pacing and controlled stylistic choices. Rather than seeking to overwhelm, it invites viewers into a contemplative space where the emotional impact builds, leaving a lasting impression that extends beyond the immediate viewing experience. At the heart of I Am Legend lies a core idea that is less about external event and more about the internal condition of existence. When familiar structure disappear, the film's conceptual foundation can be understood as an exploration of what remains when system of meaning, social, cultural, relational are stripped away, leaving an individual to redefine purpose in isolation. It is not simply a science fiction premise, it is a philosophical inquiry framed through genre. One of the central themes embedded with this idea is the tension between solitude and identity. Human identity is often constructed through interaction, through recognition, and through shared experience. When those elements are removed, the question raises, does identity persist in the same form or does it begin to erode? The film engages with this uncertainty by presenting a conceptual space where identity must be maintained without external reinforcement. This creates a quiet but persistent examination of selfhood, suggesting that identity is both resilient and fragile, capable of enduring yet constantly at risk of desolation. Closely tied to this is the theme of meaning making. In an environment where traditional goals, structure, and expectations no longer apply, meaning does not disappear, rather, it must be actively constructed. The film's core idea suggests that purpose is not an inherent property of the world but something imposed upon it by human intention. This introduces a subtitle but significant message that meaning is an act of will. It is something that must be chosen and reaffirmed even when there is no clear evidence that it matters. This perspective transforms the narrative framework into a meditation on persistence, not just in a physical sense but in a psychological and existential one. Another important conceptual layers involve the relationship between humanity and its own creation. While the broader science fiction tradition, there is often an exploration of unintended consequence, how progress can lead to outcomes that challenge or destabilize the very system it was meant to improve. Here, that idea is distilled into a more intimate scale. The film does not present this as a grand cautionary tale filled with spectre, but rather as a quiet reflection of responsibility. It raises questions about control, foresight, and the limit of human understanding, suggesting that advancement without full comprehension can lead to situations where humanity must confront itself in unfamiliar and uncomfortable way. The theme of isolation also played on multiple levels with the film's conceptual framework. It is not limiting to physical separation but extends into emotional and philosophical territory. Isolation becomes a condition that reshapes perception, altering how reality is experienced and interpreted. In such a state, time itself can feel different, slower, more repetitive, or even detached from its usual markers. This altered perception contributes to the film's underlying message about the adaptability of the human mind. It suggests that even in the absence of normalcy, consciousness continue to seek pattern, routine, and form of stability. At the same time, the film engages with the idea of hope as a conceptual force rather than a simple emotional response. Hope in this context is not portrays optimism or expectation of positive outcome. Instead, it is framed as a form of resistance, a refusal to expect meaningless. This reframing position hope as an active, deliberate stance rather than a passive feeling. It becomes something that must be maintained through effort, even when circumstances provide little encouragement. In this sense, the film's message leaned toward a philosophical assertion that the act of continuing of resistance in the face of uncertainty carried its own form of significance. There is also an implicit exploration of boundaries between human and non-human, known and unknown, control and chaos. These boundaries are not presented as fixed, they are fluid and subject to reinterpretation. The film's conceptual design invites viewers to question where these lines are drawn and whether they hold the same meaning in altered conditions. This ambiguity contributes to a sense of unease but also deepens the intellectual engagement, encouraging reflection rather than providing clear answers. Stylistically, the film supports these ideas through minimalism and restraint. The absence of excessive detail or distraction allows the core theme to emerge more clearly. The environment becomes a canvas for abstraction, with space and silence carry symbolic weight. This restraint reinforces the notion that the story's true focus is not on external complexity but on internal processes, how thought, perception, and meaning evolve under pressure. Ultimately, the core idea of the film can be understood as an exploration of human continuity in the absence of context. It examines how identity, purpose, and hope are sustained when the usual framework that support them are no longer present. Rather than offering definitive conclusion, it presents a conceptual space in which these questions can be contemplated. The film's message does not insist on a single interpretation, instead it invites viewers to consider the nature of existence itself, how it is defined and how it is maintained and how it endures even in the most reduced and uncertain condition. At the center of the film lies a conflict that operates less as a traditional struggle between opposing forces and more as a layered tension between internal conviction and external reality. Rather than relying on straightforward opposition, the film constrains its general conflict through a series of moral dilemma and psychological challenges that gradually intensify. This makes the conflict feel less immediate but more enduring, rooted in the resistance of uncertainty rather than in clear resolution. One of the most prominent aspects of this conflict is the tension between cold control and acceptance. On one side is the human inclination to impose order, to understand and potentially alter circumstances through logic, discipline, and structure effort. On the other is the recognition that not all conditions can be controlled or reversed. This creates a moral dilemma whether to continue asserting control in the face of diminishing return or to expect limitation and adapt accordingly. The film does not frame this as a single choice. Instead, it presents it as an ongoing negotiation where each stance carries its own psychological and ethical weight. Closely connected to this is the challenge of responsibility. The film's conceptual framework raises questions about the contents to which individuals are comfortable for the broader outcome, particularly when those outcomes emerge from system or decisions that extend beyond any single person. This introduces subtitle but persistent tension, the burden of feeling responsible versus the reality of limited agency. The conflict here is not about assigning blame but about grappling with the implication of action and consequence. It asks whether responsibility diminishes in isolation or becomes more pronounced in the absence of other. Another significant layer of the film's conflict involves the preservation of purpose. In an environment where traditional goals and societal expectations no longer function, purpose becomes something that must be self defined. This creates a dilemma between continuing to pursue established ideals and redefining what those ideals mean under new conditions. The tension arises from the uncertainty of whether existing framework of meaning remain valid or whether they need to be fundamentally reimaged. This is not a one time decision but an ongoing process, making the conflict dynamic rather than static. The film also engages with the boundary between rationality and emotional response. In situation of prolonged strain, maintaining a purely logical approach can come into conflict with deeper emotional need. This creates a dual challenge: how to remain grounded in reason while acknowledging the influence of emotion. The tension here is subtle but powerful, as it reflects a broader human struggle. Too much reliance on rationality can lead to detachment, while an excess of emotional influence can disrupt clarity. The central conflict therefore includes finding a balance between these two modes of experience without fully resolving the tension between them. There is also a philosophical dimension to the conflict that revolves around the concept of normalcy. When familiar structure dissolves, the definition of what is normal becomes unstable. This instability introduces a challenge whether to hold on to previous standard or to adopt to new realities. The conflict is not simply about change but about the criteria used to evaluate that change. It raises question about whether normalcy is an objective condition or a subjective contrast shaped by context. This ambiguity contributes to a sense of unease, and absence of clear benchmark make decision making more complex. Ethical ambiguity further deepens the central conflict. The film does not present clear-cut distinction between right and wrong. Instead, it operates within a spectrum of competing values. Action that may seem justified from one perspective can appear questionable from another. This lack of moral clarity forces a continuous process of evaluation, where decision must be made without the reassurance of certainty. The tension here is intellectual as well as emotional, encouraging viewer to engage with the implication rather than seeking definitive answer. Additionally, the conflict encompasses the idea of endurance versus transformation. There is a persistent question of whether the appropriate response to extreme conditions is to endure them while maintaining existing principles or to transform in order to adopt. Each option carries consequences. Endurance may preserve identity but risk stagnation, while transformation may enable survival but alter fundamental aspect of self. This dilemma reinforces the film's broader exploration of identity and continuity, positioning the conflict as both personal and philosophical. Stylistically, the direction by Forensic Awareness support this multifaceted conflict through restraint and consistency. The absence of overt exposition allows the tension to emerge gradually embedded with the film's tone and pacing. This approach encourages reflection rather than immediate judgment, aligning the viewer experience with the film's thematic concern. Ultimately, the central conflict of the film is defined by its complexity and subtlety. It is not confined to a single struggle but unfolds across multiple dimensions, moral, psychological, or philosophical. By avoiding clear resolution and emphasizing ongoing tension, the film creates a conflict that feels continuous rather than episodic. It invites viewers to consider not just the nature of the challenges presenting, but the process by which those challenges are understood and navigated. A close look at the film reveals a thematic structure that is both layered and deliberately restrained. Rather than presenting its idea in a direct or declarative way, the film allows its theme to emerge gradually through tone, atmosphere, and conceptual framing. These themes span ethical questions, emotional arc, and broader cultural topic, creating a reflective experience that extends beyond genre expectation. One of the most prominent thematic thread involves ethical responsibility. The film raises question about the limit of human intervention and the consequence of attempting to reshape natural processes. This is not framed as a simple cautionary stance but as a more complex inquiry into intention versus outcome. It asks whether positive intent is sufficient to justify risk or whether ethical responsibility must also account for unforeseen consequences. This tension reflects a broader concern with a modern society where technological and scientific advancement often outspace the ability to fully predict their impact. The film does not offer definitive answer, but it encourages a careful consideration of accountability in the space of uncertainty. Closely connected to this is the theme of control versus humility. There is an underlying suggestion that human systems often operate under the assumption of mastery of being able to understand, predict, and manage outcome. The film challenging this assumption by presenting a conceptual environment where control is limited and often illusory. This introduces an ethical question about the extent to which control should be pursued and when it be necessary to concept expect limitation. The tension between these perspectives create a subtitle but persistent thematic presence, inviting viewers to reflect on the balance between ambition and restraint. The emotional arc of the film is centered on endurance and psychological resilience. Rather than focusing on dramatic emotional shift, it emphasizes slow, sustained engagement with internal state. The emotional experience is shaped by repetition, stillness, and gradual change, suggesting that resilience is not defined by moment of intensity, but by the ability to continue despite monotony or uncertainty. This approach aligns with the film's overall tone, reinforcing the idea that emotional strength often manifests quietly rather than dramatically. Another important emotional theme is the need for connection. Even in the absence of traditional social structure, the impulse toward connection remains a defining aspect of human experience. The film explores how this need persists and adopts, shaping behavior and perception in a subtitle way. This theme is not presenting as overt sentimentality but as an underlying current that influences the film's mood. It highlights the idea that connection is not merely a social convenience but a fundamental opponent of identity and emotional stability. From a cultural perspective, the film engages with contemporary anxieties about global vulnerability. It reflects concern about how interconnected systems where scientific specific environment or societal can lead to widespread consequences when disrupted. This theme resonates with modern audience as it mirrors real-world discussion about risk, preparedness, and the fragility of complex systems. The film does not directly reference specific events or scenarios, but its thematic framework aligns with broader cultural conservation about uncertainty and resilience in a rapidly changing world. There is also subtitled exploration of individualism versus collective identity. In the absence of a functioning, the role of the individuals becomes more pronounced. This raises question about whether identity is inherently personal or fundamentally tied to community. The film leaned toward the idea that while individuality can persist, it is shaped and defined by the presence or absence of other. This creates a nose perspective on independence, suggesting that it is both empowering and limiting. Another theme worth noting is the passage of time and its psychological impact. Without traditional marker or shared experience, times become less structured and more subjective. This alters how it is perceived and experienced, contributing to the film's introspective tone. The theme of time is closely linked to the idea of routine, as repetition becomes a way to impose order and maintain stability. This reflects a broader human tendency to create pattern as a mean of coping with uncertainty. The film also touches on the concept of hope, though in a restrained and understated manner. Hope is not depicted as optimism or expectation of positive outcome, but as a deliberate choice to continue engaging with the world despite ambiguity. This reframing position hope as an act of resistance rather than a passive feeling. It becomes a thematic anchor that supports the film exploration of endurance and meaning. Stylistically, the direction by forensic awareness reinforces these themes through consistency and minimalism. The absence of excessive exposition allows the thematic element to emerge organically, encouraging viewer to interpret rather than simply observe. This approach aligns with the film's overall emphasis on reflection and introspection. The theme explored in this film encompasses a wide range of ethical, emotional, and cultural concerns, from question of responsibility and control to exploration of resilience, connection, and time. The film contrasts a thematic landscape that is both cohesive and open-ended. It does not seek to provide clear answer but instead invite ongoing contemplation, making its thematic impact both subtle and enduring. The emotional connection created by the film is built less on dramatic escalation and more on sustained atmosphere and thematic resonance. It does not rely on rapid emotional highs and lows. Instead, it draws viewers in through a carefully controlled mode that gradually deepen over time. This approach results in a connection that feels personal and reflective rather than immediate or overwhelming. At the level of the mood, the film establishes a quiet, persistent sense of stillness. This stillness is not empty. It carries a subtitle emotional weight that invites the viewers to slow down and engage more effectively. The absence of constant activity creates space for contemplation, allowing the audience to absorb the environment and analyze its tone. Over time, this atmosphere becomes immersive, shaping how viewers emotionally respond. Rather than being guided towards specific reaction, they are given room to experience the mood in their own way, which strengthens the sense of personal involvement. This mood is clearly tied to the film's thematic focus on isolation and endurance. These themes resonate because they reflect universal aspects of human experience even when presenting in an abstract or heightened context. Isolation, in particularly, is something that viewers can relate to on a varying level, whether as physical separation, emotional distance, or moment of introspection. The films amplify this feeling through stylistic choices, making it more pronounced without needing explicit explanation. As a result, the emotional connection is not imposed but emerges naturally from the viewer's own association. Endurance add another layer to this connection. The film presents persistence not as a dramatic act but as a continuous, often quiet processes. This portrayal aligns with real world experience where silence is rarely defined by single moment of triumph but by ability to keep going over time. Viewers may find themselves recognize this pattern which create a sense of familiarity within the film's otherwise unusual setting. This familiarity strengthens emotional engagement as it bridges the gap between the film's world and the viewer's own experience. The viewer's experience is also shaped by the film's pacing. By allowing scene to unfold slowly, the film encourages a deeper layer of attention. This pacing can initially feel distant to some viewers, particularly those accustomed to faster rhythm, but it ultimately serves to enhance emotional immersion. This gradual build-up of mood and theme create a cumulative effect where the emotional impact becomes more apparent as the film progresses. This is not a connection that relies on instant gratification, it requires patience, but it offers a more lasting impression in return. Another important factor in the emotional connection is the film's use of restraint. It avoids overt sentimentality, choosing instead to suggest emotions rather than explicitly display them. This restraint invites viewers to appreciate actively in the experience, filling in emotional gap with their own interpretation. Such as an approach can be more engaging than direct expression, as it allows for a broader range of response. Different viewers may connect with different aspects of the film, making the experience feel individualized. Sound and silence play a crucial role in shaping this connection. The film often uses minimal sound design, allowing quiet moments to carry emotional significance. When sound is introduced, it becomes more impactful because it contrasts with the surrounding silence. This dynamic creates a rhythm that guides the viewer's emotional state without dictating it. The result is a more subtitle form of engagement where emotion is felt rather than announced. Visually, the film reinforces emotional tone through composition and scale. Open spaces and control framing contribute to a sense of distance while also emphasizing the individual within that space. This visual language supports the theme of isolation and introspection, making them rather than abstract. The viewer is not just observing these ideas but experiencing them through the film's design. The theme of hope and meaning further deepen the emotional connection. These themes are presented in a subdued manner, focusing on resistance rather than isolation resolution. This allows viewers to reflect on their own perspective surrounding how meaning is created and maintained in challenging circumstances. The film does not provide clear answers which can make the emotional experience more thought provoking. It encourages viewers to engage with ideas on a personal level, extending the connection beyond the duration of the film. Ultimately, the emotional connection of the film is defined by its subtlety and consistency. It does not aim to overwhelm but to immerse, creating a space where mood and theme can resonate over time. By combining control, pacing, restraint, expression, and universal theme, the film fosters a connection that feels both introspective and enduring. It invites viewers not just to watch but to reflect, turning the experience into something that continues to evolve even after the film has ended. When analyzing the character in this film, it becomes clear that the film adopts a highly focused and minimalistic approach to characterization rather than presenting a wide ensemble. It builds its identity around a small number of figures who function less as the traditional plot drivers and more as thematic anchors. This allows each character to carry a distinct conceptual weight, contributing to the film's broader exploration of identity, isolation, and resilience. At the center is the main character who can be understood through a blend of archetypes: the warrior, the seeker, and the reluctant guardian. These archetypal layers are not presenting in exaggerated form but are instead grounded in a restrained introspective portrayal. The severe aspect reflect endurance and adaptability, suggesting a personality shaped by persistence rather than dominance. The seeker dimension introduces a more intellectual and purposeful quality, indicating a driver to understand, resolve, or impose meaning on circumstances. Meanwhile, the reluctant guardian archetype adds an emotional undertone, impiling a sense of responsibility that exists alongside fatigue and vulnerability. In terms of personality trait, the main character is defined by discipline, introspection, and emotional restraint. There is a noticeable emphasis on routine and control, which function as a stabilizing mechanism. This suggests a personality that relies on structure to maintain balance, particularly in the absence of external. At the same time, there is an undercurrent of fragility, an indication that these controls are not absolute but actively maintained. The character's emotional range is deliberately subdued, favoring subtitle expression over display. This restraint aligns with the film's overall tone, reinforcing its emphasis on quiet endurance rather than dramatic intensity. Another important aspect of this character is the tension between rationality and emotional need. The main character operates within a framework of logic and purpose, yet there is a persistent suggestion that this framework is incomplete without emotional grounding. This creates a layered portrait where intellect and feeling coexist but do not always align. The result is a character who feels both composed and unsettled, embodying the film's broader thematic tension between control and vulnerability. Supporting figure, though limited in presence, serve as a conceptual contrast rather than fully independent arc. These secondary characters can be interpreted as variation on the theme of connection and perspective. They often represent alternative way of engaging with the same environment, whether through different emotional responses, belief system, or approaches to meaning. In this sense, they function as mirror or counterpart to the main character, highlighting aspects of personality and worldview that might otherwise remain implicit. From an archetypal standpoint, this supporting role may align with figures such as companion, the believer, or the catalyst. The companion archetype emphasizes emotional grounded the human need for connection, while the believer introduces an element of faith or convention that operate outside purely rational framework. The catalyst, meanwhile, represents change or disruption, promoting shift in perspective without necessarily dominating the narrative. These archetypes are not presenting in isolation but often overlap, contributing to a sense of thematic cohesion. In terms of personality trait, the secondary character tend to exhibit greater openness or expressiveness compared to the central figure. This contrast serves to highlight the main character restraint, creating a dynamic interplay between introspection and outward engagement. Their present introduce a subtitle variation in tone, offering moment of contrast without fundamentality, altering the film's overall mood. This measured use of supporting character ensure that the focus remain on thematic exploration rather than interpersonal complexity. It is also worth noting that characterization in the film is closely tied to environment and tone. Characters are not defined slowly by dialogue or interaction but by how they exist with the film's visual or emotional space. This approach aligns with the direction of Fornes Laverne, who prioritized atmosphere and consistency over conventional character development. As a result, the characters feel integrated into the film's broader design, functioning as extension of its theme rather than separate narrative entities. Overall, the character analysis of the film reveal a deliberate emphasis on the minimalism and symbolic depth. The main characters serve as a complex focal point, embodying multiple archetypes and personality traits that reflect the film's central concern. The secondary character, while less prominent, provide essential contrast and thematic reinforcement. Together, they create a character framework that supports the film's introspective tone, prioritizing internal complexity over external action. Discussing the acting in this film means focusing on a performance style that carries emotional weight through restraint rather than spectacle. The films depend heavily on presence, subtitle shift in expression, and the ability to hold attention in extended, quiet stretches. that place a unique demand on its cast, especially the lead, where performance becomes less about dialogue and more about internal energy. At the center is Will Smith, whose work here stand apart from many of his more outwardly charismatic roles. As a lead actor, he leans into stillness, allowing emotion to surface gradually instead of projecting it immediately. There is a noticeable reduction in the usual performative rhythm. Instead of fast delivery or overt intensity, he adopts a slower, more controlled cadence. This shift is significant because it asks the audience to pay closer attention, to read between expression, poses, and physical presence. Emotionally, his presence feels layered rather than direct. There is a constant sense of something being held back, which create tension with the character's demon. This restraint allows vulnerability to emerge in a subtitle way, making the performance feel more grounded and human. It is not about dramatic breakdown or exaggerated expression, it's about the quiet persistence of feeling over time. That approach aligns closely with the film's overall mood, reinforcing its introspective tone. Another strength of its performance lies in consistency and maintaining emotional engagement. A film with limited interpersonal eh, interaction requires steady internal rhythm, and he manages to sustain that without noticeable fluctuation. The emotional tone remains cohesive, which help anchor the viewer's experience. Even in moments while the film becomes visually expansive, his view presence keep the emotional focus centered and contained. The supporting cast through limited in screen presence, contributing in a way that complements rather than competes. These supporting cast members are not designed to dominate the emotional landscape. Instead, they introduce variation in tone and perspective. Their performances tend to be more outwardly expressive, which create a contrast with the lead's Christine. This contrast is emotional because it prevents the films from becoming emotionally monotonous. It leaves texture without disrupting the overall balance. From emotional standpoint, the supporting role often carry a sense of immediacy, where the lead performance is mere and internal, whose performance brings a slightly more direct emotional energy. This difference does not feel disconnected, rather it highlights the range of emotional responses within the same environment. The interplay between restraint and openness become a stable but effective dynamic. Chemistry in these films operate differently than in more dialogue-driven or ensemble basic projects. Instead of relying on frequent interaction, it is built through contrast and presence. That connection between performances is felt not through extended exchange but through the way their emotional tone align or diverge. This creates a quieter form of chemistry, one that depends on atmosphere rather than interaction. There is also an interesting aspect of emotional projection in how the lead performance interact with the environment. Will Smith often carries signs alone which require a form of chemistry not just with the other actor but with space itself. His ability to fill silence and maintain engagement becomes a defining feature of the performances. This kind of acting demand control as there is a little room for distraction or external support. The direction by forensic cleverness support this performance style by allowing scene to breathe. There is no rush to move from one emotional beat to the other. This gives the actors, particularly the bad, the space to develop a consistent emotional presence. The camera often linger, reinforcing the importance of subtitle expression over overt action. Overall, the acting in this film is defined by its emotional discipline. The lead actor delivers a performance that is introspective, control, and quietly powerful, while the supporting cast add contrast and variation without overwhelming the central tone. The chemistry is understated but effective, rooted in atmosphere rather than interaction. Together, these themes create a performance landscape that feels cohesive, mature, and deeply aligned with the film's mood. When evaluating realism and character depth in this film, the discussion naturally centers on how the film balances a heightened premise with grounded human behavior. Despite operating within a speculative framework, the films make a clear effort to anchor its character in a recognizable psychological pattern. This grounding is what gives the performance and character construction a sense of believability, even when the surrounding context is far removed from everyday experience. In terms of character development, the film takes a minimalistic but deliberate approach. Instead of relying on extensive backstory, overt exposition, it builds depth through repetition, routine, and subtitle variation. Development is not presented as the dramatic arc with clear milestone, rather it unfolds gradually, often through some behavioral shift and emotional undercurrent. This method aligns with the film's overall pacing, where changes incremental and sometimes almost imperceptible. For some viewers, this restrained progression can feel understand, but it also mirrors how real human behavior often revolve quietly without clear markers. The film also wide over explaining its character emotional state, which enhance realism. In many cases, emotions are implied rather than explicit state, allowing viewers to interpret them through context and performance. This approach respect the audience's ability to read subtitle cues, and it aligns with how emotions are often experienced in real life, not as clear declaration but as layered and sometimes contradictory feeling. The absence of constant verbalization adds to the sense of authenticity, even if it required more active engagement from the viewers. Emotional range is handled with similar restraint rather than showcasing a wide spectrum of dramatic highs and lows. The film focuses on a narrower band of sustained emotional state. Within this range, however, there is a significant no small gift in tone, whether through expression, posture, or pacing, carry considerable weight, but they occur within otherwise controlled framework. This creates a sense of depth that is subtitle but effective, rewarding viewers who pay close attention to detail. At the same time, this restrained emotional range may not resonate equally with all audience. Some viewers may expect more overt expression or clearer emotional transition, particularly given the film's genre. However, the decision to felt over dramatization appears in tension, reinforcing the film emphasis on introspection and psychological realism. It suggests that emotional depth does not necessarily require constant variation, but can instead emerge from consistency and gradual change. The supporting actor, while more limited in scope, contribute to the film realism by introducing contrast. Their presence provide alternative emotional perspective which help contextualize the central character behavior. These contrasts are not exaggerated, they remain with the same tonal framework, ensuring that the films remain a cohesive sense of reality. Even with less screen time, these characters feel purposeful rather than purely functional, adding to the overall sense of depth. The direction by Francis Cleverness play a key role in maintaining this balance between realism and stylization. This approach avoid excessive dramatization, allow viewers to remain grounded. The camera often observe rather than emphasize, while which reinforce the feeling through the character that the character exists naturally within their environment. This observational style supports the film's commitment to believability even as it operates within a speculative genre. Another aspect of realism lies in how the films handle emotional endurance over time. Instead of presenting resilience as a constant state, it acknowledges fluctuation and fatigue. This adds a layer of authenticity as it reflects the reality that endurance is not static but requires continuous effort. The portrayal of this ongoing effort contributes significantly to the film's sense of depth, making the character feel more human and less archetypal. In conclusion, the realism and character depth in these films are achieved through restrained consistency and attention to psychological detail. Character development unfold gradually, believability is reinforced through grounded behavior, and emotional range is expressed through nuance rather than intensity. While this approach may feel subtitle, it ultimately creates a more authentic and immersive portrayal while aligning the film's character with recognizable human experience. Despite the extraordinary context in which they exist, a calm analytical look at the production budget of the film places it within the category of high budget coast studio production of the mid 2000s. Estimates generally position the film's budget in the range of $140 million to $160 million, a figure that reflects both its technical demand and its intended global reach. This level of investment suggests a project designed to balance commercial appeal within a controlled atmosphere driven presentation. In terms of cost ranges, the budget aligned with other large-scale science fiction disaster-oriented film of its era. Productions such as War of the World and Day After Tomorrow operated with a similar or slightly higher financial bracket, largely towards their emphasis on large ensemble cast and excessive visual effects sequence. By comparison, these films appear more contained on the surface, but its budget reflect a different kind of complexity, one rooted in environmental transformation and sustained visual consistency rather than continuous large-scale action. Resource allocation within the films appear to have been distributed across three primary areas: location management, visual effect, and talent. A significant portion of the budget was likely dictated to location control and production design, creating the impression of an unoccupied urban environment require extensive coordination, including securing filming permits, restricting access to public spaces, and modified real-world location to match the desired aesthetic. These logistical requirements can be costly, particularly in a major metropolitan setting where disruption must be carefully managed. Visual effects represent another major area of expenditure, though your use is relatively minor compared to the more effect-driven film. Rather than focusing on constant spectacle, the films employ a digital tool to enhance realism, altering environment, extending physical sets, and integrating elements that support the overall tone. This approach requires a consistent level of technical precision throughout the film, which can accumulate significant cost over time. The emphasis is not on quantity of fact but on their integration, ensuring that they remain cohesive with the live action footage. Talent cost also play an important role in the budget structure. With Will Smith in the lead role, the production would have allocated to a substantial portion of its budget to securing and supporting a high profile performer. His involvement not only increased upfront costs but also served as a strategic investment. An established actor often contribute to the film's marketability and international reach. In addition, the direction by Francine Laverne imply a production team capable of executing a visually controlled and tonally consistent project, which further contribute to the personnel-related expenses. When comparing this budget to the similar film, it becomes evident that I Am Legend occupy a middle ground between spectral-driven blockbuster and more modestly scaled genre appeal. Unlike productions that rely heavily on continuous action sequence or large cast, these films challenges its resources into maintaining a specific atmosphere and visual identity. This distinction is important as it demonstrates how budget size does not always correlate directly with visible scale. Instead, it reflects the underlying demand of the film's concept and execution. And other consideration is the balance between practical and digital production method. The film appeared to combine real-world location with digital enhancement rather than relying entirely on contrasted sets or fully computer-generated environment. This hybrid approach can be cost-effective in some areas while increasing complexity in other, particularly during post-production. The need to seamlessly integrate these elements require additional time and technical expertise, which is reflective in the overall budget. In summary, the production budget of the film can be understood as a carefully managed allocation of resources aimed at achieving visual authenticity and tonal consistency. With an estimated cost in the 140 to 160 million dollar range, it aligned with comparable film of its time while distinguishing itself through a more restrained use of spectrum. The investment in location management, visual effect integration, and high profile talent underscore our strategic approach that prioritizes atmosphere and cohesion over excess. A major look at the domestic performance of the film being with the most important understanding in the United States and the Canada market, which another define the standard domestic box office in the industry term. The films earn approximately to $56 million in this range, a figure that places it comfortably with the upper tier of release for its year. This level of performance indicates strong initial turnout as well as sustained audience interest over subsequent week. From an audience trend perspective, the film benefited from broad demographic reach. Its positioning as a science fiction title with elements of suspense and drama allow it to attract multiple audience segments simultaneously. Younger viewers were drawn by the genre framework and visual presentation, while older audiences respond to its more restrained tone and thematic weight. This cross demographic appeal is often a key factor in achieving high domestic total, as it reduces reliance on a single audience group. Release timing also played an important role. The film debuted during the holiday season, a period typically associated with increased theater attendance. This timing can amplify box office results, as audiences are more likely to engage with major or studio release during this window. Holiday competition can also be intense, requiring a film to maintain strong word of mouth to sustain momentum. In this case, the film performance suggests that it managed to hold audience interest beyond its opening weekend, which is often a sign of stable reception. When compared to the similar film, I Am Legend demonstrate a competitive domestic performance within its genre. For instance, War of the World achieved higher domestic earnings, reflecting its larger scale and broader action-oriented appeal. On the other hand, Children of Man earned significantly less in the same market despite critical acclaim, due in part of its more niche positioning and less commercial tone. These comparisons highlight how I Am Legend occupy a middle ground, more commercially accessible than most of its peers, but still maintaining a degree of stylistic restraint. Another factor influencing domestic earnings is star presence. The involvement of Will Smith contributed to the film's marketability, particularly in North America, where his recognition is well established. Films led by world recognized actors often benefit from stronger opening weekend, and audiences are more likely to engage based on familiarity and prior expectation. This initial draw can set the foundation for overall domestic success, provided the films maintain audience interest afterward. The domestic box office trajectory also reflects typical pattern for high budget release of its era, indicating a relatively stable performance curve. This suggests that audience reception was consistent enough to support continued audience even as new release entered the market. While it did not achieve record-breaking longevity, its performance remained solid across multiple weeks. In terms of regional audience behavior, North America viewers have historically shown strong interest in science fiction films that combine recognizable themes with accessible storytelling. I'm Legend aligned with this trend by offering a familiar genre framework while maintaining a distinctive tone. This balance likely contributed to its ability to attract repeat viewing and sustain engagement beyond its initial release period. It is also worth noting that domestic box office figures are often influenced by marketing strategies and distribution scale. The film received a wide release, ensuring availability across a large number of theaters. This level of distribution increased the potential for high earning, as it allowed the film to reach diverse demographic areas simultaneously. Combined with a marketing campaign that emphasized atmosphere and scale, this strategy helped maximize its domestic reach. The domestic box office performance of the film reflect a combination of broad audience appeal, strategic release timing, and effective use of star power. Its earnings in the United States and Canada position it as a commercially successful entry within its genre, particularly when compared to the film with similar theme. The film's ability to maintain steady attendance over time underscore its alignment with audience expectation in this region, while also highlighting the role of market condition and distribution in shaping its overall result. A focused look at the international performance of the film show how strongly it traveled beyond North America, with overseas earnings reaching roughly $330 million when combined with its domestic total. This placed the film's worldwide gross in the mid $580 million range, with international market contributed the largest share. This distribution is typical of high-budget, globally marketing studio film, where success increasingly depends on performance outside the home market. From a regional standpoint, the films perform particularly well in Europe and part of Asia. In the United States, France, and Germany, the film attracted strong attendance, reflecting the region's established interest in science fiction with a serious tone. These markets tend to respond well to the film that balance spectacle with the serious tone. These markets tend to respond well to the film that balance spectacle with thematic weight, and the film retains style that did not limit its appeal. Instead, it appeared to have benefited from audience who appreciate a more atmospheric approach within a familiar genre framework. In Asian market, including Japan and South Korea, the film also achieved solid results. The performance level varied depending on local preferences and competition at the time of release. These regions often show strong engagement with visually distinctive films, particularly those that emphasize mood and setting. However, audience reception in these markets can be influenced by pacing and tone, and the film's slower, more introspective style may have limited its peak performance compared to faster paced genre entries. Latin American markets such as Mexico and Brazil contributed meaningfully to the overall international total. In this region, the film accessible premise and recognizable lead actor help drive attendance. The combination of genre familiarity and star presence often play a significant role in this market, where audience preferences can favor films that are both visually engaging and easy to follow without heavy reliance on dialogue. Market assumption internationally reflect a balance between accessibility and stylistic specificity. While the film's tone is more restrained than many comparable productions, it's still aligned with global audience expectation for high production value entertainment. Its emphasis on visual storytelling allow it to cross language barrier effectively, which is a key factor in international success. Films that rely less on complex dialogue and more on atmosphere often perform better across diverse linguistic in market. Marketing effect is another important element in understanding the film's international earning. The promotional strategy emphasizes the universal themes such as isolation and survival, as well as the scale of its setting. This approach ensured that the film's core appeal would be communicated clearly across different culture. Trailers and advertising material focus on visual imagery and mood, which translated well in international campaigns. Additionally, the films of Will Smith provide a recognizable anchor for the global audience, enhancing the film visibility and credibility. When compared to the similar film, this film demonstrated competitive international performance. For example, War of the World achieved higher global total, supported by its large scale and more action driven presentation. In contrast, Children of Man earned significantly less internationally, reflecting its more niche positioning and inviting commercial focus. These comparisons highlight how Legend occupies a middle ground, combining both accessibility to reach wide audience while maintaining a distinct tone. Another factor influencing international results is release strategies. Staggered release dates across different regions allow the time to maintain visibility over an extended period, reducing direct competition in certain markets. This approach can help sustain audience interest and maximize overall earning, particularly for films with strong visual appeal. In summary, the international box office performance of the film reflects a successful global rollout supported by broad genre appeal, effective marketing, and strong star recognition. Its ability to perform consistently across multiple regions underscore the importance of visual storytelling and universal themes in international market. While its overall earning demonstrates its position as a commercially viable and globally resonant production, a clear understanding of the financial position of this film being with its worldwide growth, which reached approximately 585 to 590 million dollar. This figure combined domestic earning from the United States and Canada with international revenue from multiple global markets. From a purely numerical standpoint, this places the film among the most successful studio release of its release period, particularly within the science fiction category. Worldwide gross alone does not determine profitability. A break-even analysis required consideration of total cost, including not only the production budget estimated in the 140 to 160 million dollar range, but also marketing and distribution expenses. For a film of this case, marketing cost can be substantial, often ranging from 70 million dollar to over 100 million dollar, depending on the intensity and global reach of the campaign. When these figures are combined, the total investment for the films likely fall within the range of 220 to 260 million dollar. In industry practice, studios do not retain the full box office gross revenue is split between exhibitor and distributor, with the studios typically receiving a higher percentage from domestic market and lower share from international market. On average, studios must retain around 50 to 55% of domestic earning and approximately 35 to 45% of international earning. Though these percentages can vary by region and agreement, applying these general ratios, the film's effective return from its global box office would be significantly lower than its total gross, likely in the range of 250 to 300 million dollar. This calculation placed the films near or above its estimated break-even point, slowly on theoretical revenue. In many cases, studio aim for a worldwide gross that is roughly 2 to 2.5 times the production budget to ensure profitability, often accounting for all costs. By this standard, I Am Legend meet the threshold, indicating that it likely achieve financial stability through its theoretical run alone. Beyond theoretical income, additional revenue streams play a crucial role in the overall profitability. Home media sales, including DVD and Blu-rays format, were particularly strong during the late 2000s, contributed significantly to the film's financial lifestyle. Television licensing, streaming rights, and international syndications further extend revenue over time. These secondary streams often provide the margin that transform a break-even theoretical performance into a clearly profitable one. Global audience reach is another important factor in this analysis. The film's ability to perform consistently across North America, Europe, Asia, and Latin America demonstrate a level of universality in its appeal. This broad reach reduces financial risk by diversifying revenue sources across multiple regions. Markets such as the United Kingdom, Japan, and Brazil contributed to the overall total, reinforcing the importance of international distribution in modern studio income. Distribution costs also influence the break-even calculation. These include expenses related to prints, logistics, and regional marketing adaptation. While these costs are not included with broader marketing budget, they still represent a significant financial commitment. The efficiency of distribution, ensuring wide availability while engaging expenses, can directly affect profitability. In summary, the worldwide gross of the film reflects strong global audience, but its financial success is better understood through a combination of factors. When production budget, marketing expenses, and revenue sharing models are considered, the films often appear to have reached or exceeded its break-even point through theoretical earning, with additional revenue streams likely securing its profitability. This outcome illustrates how large-scale films rely on a combination of global audience engagement and diversified income channel to achieve financial success. A precise profitability assessment of the film point toward a financially successful outcome through the conclusion depend on how revenue and cost are interpreted. The film's worldwide gross of roughly 585 to 590 million dollars significantly exceeded its estimated production cost of 140 to 160 million dollars. However, a simple comparison of gross versus budget does not reflect actual studio return, as theater retain a substantial share of box office receipt. When revenue split are applied, roughly 50 to 55% from domestic market like the United States and Canada, and 35 to 45% from international market, the studio theoretical income likely fall in the range of 250 to 300 million dollar against total cost that may reach to 20 to 260 million once marketing and distributions are included. The film appeared to move beyond break even during its theoretical run through not by a large margin. Ancillary income played a decisive role in confirming profitability during the late 2000s. Home media formats such as DVD and Blu-rays were major revenue drivers, often generating substantial post-theatrical income. In addition, television licensing, streaming ranked international sanitation extend the film's earning potential over time. These revenue streams typically involve power marginal cost, which improve overall margin. For an ROI perspective, the films can be considered moderately strong rather than exceptional. It did not rely solely on theoretical dominance but achieved profitability through a combination of global box office performance and secondary income channel. This pattern is common for high budget genre films that balance wide appeal with controlled production strategy. Overall, the film demonstrated a solid financial profile with steady global earning and strong ancillary revenue contribute a positive return on investment. Audience reaction to this film, a mix of broad appeal and divided expectations, shaped largely by the demographic and viewings among general audience. The films attracted strong initial engagement, particularly in regions like the United States and Canada, where mainstream science fiction releases tend to perform well. Younger viewers, especially those drawn to genre films, responded positively to its visual style and atmosphere, while older audience shows more appreciation for its restrained pacing and reflective tone. Demographically, the film managed to reach a wide audience, partially due to its presence of Will Smith, whose global recognition helped attract viewers beyond core genre fame. This broader appeal contributed to its consistent performance across different regions and age groups. Overall, the audience reaction to these films can be characterized as generally positive but varied, with engagement driven by atmosphere and style. While difference in expectation influence individual responses, the box office performance of the film plays a significant role in shaping how it is perceived both critically and within the industry. A worldwide gross approaching $600 million, placing the films in a commercially successful category, which often influence audience assumption before they even engage with critical reviews. Strong financial result tied to single accessibility and broad appeal, creating an expectation that the films align with mainstream tastes. When compared to genre peer, the film's box office result position it between large scale blockbuster and more niche science fiction entries. Films like War of the World achieve higher grosses with more action driven approaches, while others, such as The Children of Men, earn less despite critical acclaim. This comparison, often appreciation by framing I Am Legend as a commercially viable middle ground, accessible enough for a wide audience yet distant in tone. Now, for our viewers considering this film, the experience is offered. It is best suited to a specific type of audience rather than a universally broad one. Its appeal depends largely on tolerance for slower pacing and appreciation for atmosphere driven storytelling. In terms of audience type, the film is best suited for viewers who prefer reflective, immersive cinema over fast moving environment. Those who enjoy films that create a strong sense of mood and allow space for interpretations will likely find it engaging. It is particularly effective for individuals who watch films with full attention, as its emotional impact builds gradually rather than delivering immediate intensity. From an age group perspective, the film is better suited for mature teenager and adult. Younger viewers, especially those expecting a more energetic or visually dynamic experience, may find it pacing slower or tone too subdued. Older audience or more experienced film viewers are generally more receptive to its theme and stylistic choices as they align with the more contemplative viewing approach. On the other hand, the film may not be ideal for viewers seeking high energy action or frequent dramatic peak. Those who prefer clear, fast paced storytelling with constant engagement may find the experience less satisfying. Similar audience who expect traditional horror intensity or continuous suspense may feel that its restrained style does not meet those expectations. Overall, the film is recommended for viewers who value more thematic depth and emotionally subtitle. While it may not be appeal to those looking for a purely emotional or high intensity genre experience.